in any of the airliners. Uh, that's been a program for quite a while. But I can believe it. That they want Skynet. You know, I mean, there's a reason there was a movie that showed you all that. That's what they're heading for.
Yes.
They know where this is going, and they want to know everything about you. It's not just eavesdropping on your PC and your phone. They want to know where you're at every part of the day. You know, were you sitting out in were you sitting in your car in the driveway, Tyler, or were you? You know,
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was that giant blimp that they have, the NASA blimp, I think, that was running around on the East Coast. It was just recently. They did a training exercise again. Whenever they say training, that automatically makes me think of, like, you know, they're prepping for some kind of you know, staged effort to say that, you know, this was, or film it just like they did with the London attacks, supposedly. You know, whenever they start talking about that, it makes me cringe. But even more cringe-worthy was the blimp, and I forget what the name of it is, but it's that giant thing that basically it sucks up all the electronic communications that are coming out of the air in any given direction, because it's like basically a big dome-like thing that sits on the bottom of the blimp, and they have layers of Kevlar material to protect from it being shot down, and it was just floating off the East Coast, sucking up all of the communications for a couple of the bigger protests that had happened in Washington. And it's not the first time it's been seen, though, because apparently this thing flies over Maryland pretty often, and you wouldn't know because, of course, like, the thing's silent. So it may not be the only one, and also, you know, how do you know that that's at night? Like, how can you even see what's going on? That really bothers me. I don't know what the name of it is, and somebody was saying we should name it something silly, kind of like Bodie McBoatface has his name. Just give it an unofficial name other than that scary blimp from the NSA. Let's see, NSA blimp. Maryland. Oh, here we go. And then I say Maryland.
Yeah, there's one that kind of, I guess it lost gas and then it crashed into some power lines.
Yeah.
That one got kind of messed up. But...
No, this is gigantic. And it like I said, it has the layers of Kevlar and everything to make it impenetrable. So unfortunately you can't just go and try to shoot it down with your
No, nobody tried to do that.
Oh, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw that. I was like, NSA blimps.
Like, I'm not joking.
Like Mark Zuckerberg, let's start there.
Like, it keeps on saying this page cannot be reached. Hold on.
I can reach it.
Yeah, my end, I got the sad face cannot be reached. Facebook.
Let me do it.
And it looks like it's still live. Yeah. But there's only one person or 5 people on it, and yeah, so I don't know that it ever went down, but
something happened then, because there was like 20 or 30.
Well, I had to redo the stream, and then Facebook went down, and then it was up, and then it was down, and then it was up. Let me check. Is it down? Let me see if Facebook. Hold on. Is it down?
No, I'm checking here.
Is it down? Down or just me? Let me type in this. Is it down or just me? Facebook. Okay. Facebook.
Yeah, it's running again. It's up again. Maybe you can't access the page yourself through but I can access it just fine. There's no lag and it's running just fine. But yeah, I sent you the link. It was this one. It said that, it was in The Intercept, actually, a while back in April. Let's see. It was from NASA. There's a division of the National Tactical Integration Office, and oh yeah, it's called the Hoover Hammer, with an eavesdropping device that flies around, and basically it sucks up all the international shipping data emanating from Long Island, New York area. But I mean, of course, it's not limited to that location, and it's not limited to that data. So anything they want to scoop up, it can intercept wireless communications, including cell phone calls. So even beyond, it's like next level beyond the stingrays, spoofing the stuff. Like, I mean,
Huh.
it's just pulling it out of the air and
Now we're not broadcasting at
you know,
all.
Serious.
let's see.
Serious.
Antenna mounting platform is what it's described as. Helium-filled sphere inside of another sphere. With
Yeah, they
Kevlar.
used to be just like camera platforms, but then when the electronics age hit, now they're these huge, like, well, they got the cameras still too, but electronics platforms. And another reason to go out of New York City is they've essentially got their own little Homeland Security office there. They're like a mega fusion center. They're trying every technique out in New York City.
Oh yeah, yeah, and especially with this kind of thing, like you used to be able to tell what was going on when you would hear about like different types of stuff being tested within the United States, because it would get a lot of media attention, or it would get it would be something you could just observe, like it was so noisy, or it was very obvious, or you'd have to have an entire section of the area, like the whether it was the state or just around the base would get cordoned off basically. But with this, there is no reason that anybody would need to be told about what's going on, or when it's being launched, and what kind of information it's that's being sucked up, especially if it runs at night. Like I was saying, like, I'm not looking out the window up in the sky checking to see whether or not like the Hoover hammer's floating overhead. And it, the one thing it doesn't say here in the article is like what it needs to operate at in terms of the actual cruising altitude is for this thing. Because when you say blimp, I mean that could mean any altitude whatsoever. It says it could fly at altitudes of up to 68,000 feet for up to 6 months at a time, but it doesn't mean it's flying that high.
Wow, that's pretty high.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm thinking is, thank you. What I'm thinking is, it's not necessarily operating at that level all the time, but if it is, can you even see that? Unless it's like a clear sky during the day, because at night you can't see through the clouds usually. And this is white, so it reflects light off of it, so you're not going to be able to look up and be like, oh, that's very. I
don't know, like weather balloons, you could see those, and those are pretty small. I would think that they'd run some other color, or they're using some kind of technique. Maybe, I don't know what they call it. It's like the active, almost like television screen pixels that they're putting on.
Right.
Yeah. Now, active covert cloaking.
They bend the light to a certain degree, so it almost makes it. It's like it is that camouflage, which you can actually wear. Although I love ghillie suits, so I don't think I'd ever want one of those. I guess it's kind of like what is it? Like Predator had.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah. If you have a camera giving you the picture from the object beyond and just display that, you don't see anything.
Right.
Or
right.
It'd be so amorphous you couldn't tell.
Which is a really cool concept, but that's been around for over a decade. I mean, that was old news, like at least 10 years ago, and I don't think that really got out into mainstream because that got sucked up by the government right away. Military. As soon as it showed any promise, of course, you stopped hearing about the advancements in that, because I remember hearing how like, well, this would be really cool as soon as we get this one thing tweaked, and then all of a sudden I stopped hearing updates on from that outlet. But yeah, so 68,000 feet, and if you can bend the light around it, you're not necessarily going to see that floating over your state, sucking up information. And like it says, it doesn't even appear to need to be over one particular area to gather data from multiple states. So even if it's floating over Maryland all the time, and they don't send it beyond the borders of that state, it's probably able to suck up stuff from as far away as Ohio. Jeez. Oh wait, there's another article here though. I'll put that in there because this is when it was about to launch. It was back in 2014. So this is not. I mean, again, this is not new at all. back in 14.
It makes you wonder. To me, it makes you wonder why they do it. If they've got all this other capability of tracking you just off the landlines, Wi-Fi, through your phone, all the rest of it, why do they need to do that? It's like they want like some like physical, what would you call it? Another way of looking at you to say, okay, yeah, we picked you up here, but were you really there? There's some kind of correlation or.
My theory on that is simply this: like, I find that when you are when you have your own you have your own network of people that you communicate with, and of course you have somebody tapping into that and monitoring all of that. But what you can't monitor is the individual consciousness and the mind, and how you're putting together connections, and what you're actually thinking, and your intention, and all of those things that you have as an individual that are your private property, that are not things that you necessarily telegraph, no matter how much data is put together on, profiling you. So basically what the government wants to do, what all corporations want to do, is if they could, they would put a little chip in your brain to monitor all your electronic activity, in terms of what it is that you're actually thinking in real time. Because no matter how good your program is, no matter how good your data set is, you still need to have that, make those connections that the individual's making. So you can't really anticipate what they're going to do with 100% certainty, unless you have as many viewpoints as possible.
A huge problem with Facebook right now. Great. Sorry, I didn't even.
But you know what I mean. So I guess that's why I think that I think that's what drives the intent behind all of these spying programs. Because as good as your data set is, it still can't make the connections that the individual is making. A computer is not intuitive in that way. A computer is only capable of doing what you program it to do, and that's why there's the big push to make everything to make everything learn, just like a person does. But it's still not that. It's not the same. It'll never be the exact same level as an individual, because it's not unique in that way. And it doesn't have your experiences. It doesn't have your lifetime of experiences, so you can't possibly know with 100% certainty what that person is going to do or think or say. So that's why they need every single little data point that they can possibly suck up. And I think that's why they're doing it in so many ways.
So I guess it's a way of keeping up with the ranchers. Anybody that's trying to be off grid, if you are trying to hide, well, then we're going to go after with actual visual data and try to put together who you are and where you're at.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can't. That's an expensive way to do it. It just seems like doesn't seem like it's worth it. But
well, it's probably cheaper than paying human beings to be in the field all the time, even though that's what they've been doing for years and years and years. It's probably a lot cheaper just to have 20 different computer systems of how you control individuals. You're not going to be able to do that until you have that window into their motivations and their thought process. And the people who are the biggest problems in that sense are those that don't conform to the systems that are already in place. Like you're not putting out all of the details that they want, because you're not disclosing everything, or they just don't understand how you're not a part of that system, how you haven't fallen victim to the whole I don't want to say mind control, but basically to the systems that are in place. Like you haven't become part of the propaganda. The people who basically just take that as gospel, and they say, yes, this is true. It must be true because it's from a reputable source. Therefore, I should believe what's being put out there and not question. They're like, how do we control those people who are not just passively taking what we put out and absorbing it?
Yeah, well, I mean, this came across years ago, but there was North Dakota. They were one of the first states who pretty much agreed to let drones fly around, monitoring essentially the farmers of North Dakota. It's like you wouldn't think that'd be such a big concern, and yet they were one of the first places. There's not a lot of population up there. It seemed odd that they were one of the first places essentially, make it legal for this to start.
Yeah, I don't know that this was challenged very heavily in any court. Oh, okay. They can watch up to a. Oh, here we go. That previous article from 2014 says that they can watch what's happening from North Carolina to Boston, or an area the size of Texas. At one point, there were supposed to be nearly 3 dozen blimps, but after a series of operational failures and massive cost overruns, the program was dramatically scaled back to the 2 existing prototypes that the Army plans to keep flying continuously above the Aberdeen Proving Grounds for 3 years, except for maintenance and foul weather. So there's another one. It's not just the Hoover Hammer that is widely known, and it's part of the JLENS project, the Joint Land Attack Cruise Missile Defense Elevated Netted Sensor System. Wow. So it's part of Raytheon and the Pentagon, of course. So Raytheon has JLENS blimps. Oh, they operate as a pair. Yep. 360-degree radar coverage, which up to 340 miles in any direction. And can so one of them has the sucking up the vacuum capability, and then the other ones can specifically focus on threats and provide targeting information. And then they're flying the actual military drones out of the New York airport for supposed training exercises or training courses for the people who are involved in moving into that area of the military. So we can paint targets, we can bomb targets, and all of that, like by just running the things that are legally operating in our skies right now. It's not even a question of like getting permission to run these. They're already there. They're already up there. So that's nice.
So under the excuse that we're worried about cruise missiles over the United States, we are going to do this, but it actually sounds like a drone control program.
Yep.
For us.
JLENS operators can watch the live feed of trucks, trains, and cars from dozens of miles away. And they also watched Raytheon employees simulate planting a roadside improvised explosive device. So, but, now rest assured, it says the Army isn't planning to spy on anyone.
Bullshit.
It has no cameras, it has no video, nor is it tracking any people, and it does not possess the capability to see individuals. And while it can see cars, for the purposes of this test, we have no intent to track any vehicles. Well, any civilian vehicles, they say. So, yeah, and then you have, it's just like when you have that absurdity with, what was his name? The DHS guy who was it Sturtevant? Oh, ugh. He basically, but he was the first or second DHS head who went ahead, he went into the stance of what we need all of the scanners, the full body scanners in the airports, and it was his company that directly benefited from that or profited from that.
Oh yeah, that was early.
Yeah, that was way back when. But I mean, basically they tried the same shit with that, where they said, oh well, this isn't going to actually take pictures of people and be stored, and then it came out like just a few. I mean, like anybody who understands technology was just laughing at that, because the level of invasiveness was just absurd. And then people, of course, were using the images to make fun of, like, the size of people's junk, and, like all kinds of stuff was coming out about how, like, yes, all these images do get stored. It's just part of the software package that they sell to the airport, the TSA. They sell them the level, basically they give them a certain rights within the system to either save for 90 days, save for a year, or whatever. But the point is that they're getting all of the information fed to the system, so it doesn't matter if the people on the ground have access to it for 90 days. This is going into a database, and it's being it is being stored, and it's being what do you call it? It's become so much part of our lives. being purposely done? Why do you think they're groping you so much? Because they're being told, make it as invasive as possible so people choose not to go through that hassle, and they insist on going through the scanner of their own volition.
It's slave training. It's what it really is.
Yeah, because you know what? If you're traveling for business, you don't have to go through that. You can pay more, and you have your own special pass, and it's you get pre-approved, and you go through the. I never had to go through the scanning system when I was traveling for business. I mean, it's just like you walk through a different line, and you don't get harassed like that. But that's because you have protection of a corporation. The average citizen, no, you stand in line and you do what you're told.
That's pay to play.
In fact, when you go and travel around Europe, it's really funny because the whole conditioning is so ingrained in the U.S. where you have to take off your shoes and you have to to put everything aside to go through the security. I even did that. I went up to one of the airports in Europe, and I was supposed to go through the security checkpoint, and I was all prepped. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this real fast. Like even the business people still have to take off their shoes, or traveling for corporations, you still have to take off your shoes and go through that mess most of the time, to a certain degree. When you're going through the fast lanes, now they have the pre-approved where you don't even have to do half of that stuff. But they basically looked at me in the security lane and they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, I'm taking my shoes off. I have to do that, don't I?" And they're like, they just started snickering. They're like, "Why would we make you take your shoes off?" I was like, "Well, that's what they do in the U.S." And they're like, "Yeah, well," and then the guys were talking about how stupid it was. And they were like, "That doesn't have anything to do with security. That's just because that's not something that any other airport bothered with when I was over there. They're just laughing. They let you take liquids on the plane. They don't give a shit. You can have an open bottle of water when you walk on the plane. They don't make you throw it away."
Whoa. That may not be water. That could be an explosive.
Liquid explosives. Yeah.
Liquid explosives, right? Yeah. And then here they're making
butane.
people drink their own breast milk to prove that it's not explosive or poisonous or whatever the hell that is some really sick conditioning that people would put up with that. And of course, if they keep you in a cattle in a cattle chute for long enough, you'll just be so thankful that you get a little bit of freedom. And that's what happens with the airports when they keep you on those on the tarmac for hours and hours and hours, and then you're just so happy to jump off the plane and run through their security that you feel like it's so freeing to go through the scanners. I see people just getting excited about it when they have to switch, switch from one flight to another, and they have to go through another security checkpoint. They're just like, at that point, they're so tired and so beaten from dealing with the hassle of travel, they'll put up with it. They'll say, "Sure, I'll take that. And may I have some more, please, from the overlords? Keep putting me through this kind of shit, and I'll gladly pay for it." That's what really bothered me. I don't understand how when that guy got removed from the plane, when he got beat up to be taken off the plane because they needed to kick him off for some because they overbooked it. Well, I was really upset, not about the fact that he got beaten so much as I was shocked that the people on the plane didn't stand up and say, "No, you're not going to do this to this guy." To actually stand up. There were over 100 people on that plane, and they could have stood up and said, "What the fuck are you doing to this person?" But they let him get beat to a pulp and pulled off the plane. So what do you think is going to happen the next time when you do that, when you piss someone off?
Yeah,
safe?
Well, yeah, I guess it depends on if you're stirring up trouble versus you're kicking a paying customer off the flight because one of your people wants to get on board. Now that was the difference. I mean, yeah, he didn't want to do it, but nobody wants a federal air charge. Let's say nobody wants a federal charge. That's why. Because if you go up against the air marshal,
that's going to be so scary. But the point was at that time, it wasn't the air marshals that pulled him off, because they have an air marshal on board. They always do. You can always pick them out. I mean, you know who it is, but there's always one flying with you for the most part. At this point, it used to be optional or not. It wouldn't be on every flight, but now there's usually one on every flight. But from what I understood, it was not the air marshals that pulled him off. It was a private company enforcing company policy, on an individual who was a citizen who had paid for a flight, and they decided they had overbooked and they wanted to put somebody else on the flight. And he said, no, I'm not going to get off of the plane. He put up a little bit of a struggle, and instead of the people rising up against the people who were enforcing some bullshit company's policy, not even an actual law. It wasn't even like he threatened someone or, you know, like was you know, like a terrorist or anything like that. He was just saying, no, I'm not going to leave because I paid for the seat. And then he got beat to a piss and nobody did anything. They're just like, oh, let me film it. This is really shitty. We'll boycott that airline next time we fly. Like, that kind of thinking is really, really disturbing. Like, oh, we'll just boycott them and that'll... Like, the fact that you didn't stand up and say something and say, no, this is wrong, I'm not going to be a part of it. You're not going to take that person. I'll block the aisle and say you're not going to drag that person off the flight, and you're not going to, or let alone, like, not intervene and not stop them from beating the piss out of the guy. That's pretty disturbing. That means that you have deflated the people to the point, like, you have conditioned them to the point where they're willing to accept that right in front of them. That's disturbing. Because I mean, like, what there was another episode of that type of situation. It had to do with
I'm gonna switch.
a man and his
switch our
wife.
connection to a cellular connection. Hold on. This is ridiculous.
Okay. A man and his wife they were on a plane with their family, like 2 kids, and one of them wasn't allowed to sit on a seat or something like that because he had bought a seat for his kid, and then they wanted to give it to someone else, and they had argued with him about how children aren't supposed to sit on their own under a certain age, and I mean, it was a misquote of the actual rules of the airline, but they were doing it just because they felt like they wanted to make more money. And when he said, no, I'm not going to give up my seat, they basically told him, well, you're going to cause the whole flight to be delayed, and we're not going anywhere until you change your mind. And he was like, fine, I'll sit here. People around him refused to even support what he was doing. They were afraid because they were looking at him like, uh-oh, we don't want to be psychology is twisted. It's very twisted.
Well, there are laws. I mean, you can, by law, you could put up a fight with an officer if they're denying you your rights. The problem is when you do that, you're in for a fight and you're probably going to get killed if you ask me. Like how far you want to take that. But it never, like legally you can do it, but practically you don't because you know what's going to happen. It's not going to go well, and that's the problem. There's a definite conflict between what we think our rights are and what government does to secure itself. That's the big divide. When you look into
where that occurred, though, when you think about the situation, I mean, that was probably one of the. Well, I would think, like, first of all, you're in a location where they know you're not armed. You've just gone through the most stringent security that supposedly exists on the planet. You've just had everything stripped. You took everything off. You took your shoes off. You had people groping you all over to go through, or you went through a scanner that showed everything down to, like, your butt crack and up your ass, and you don't have anything on you. You're sitting on a plane and you're waiting to take off, and then somebody tells you, well, you refused to move, so now we can beat the piss out of you. And why people are not in a position, why they wouldn't recognize that, you're unarmed citizens, and if you actually took the opportunity to say, like, this is not, we will actively, physically resist you in this situation. I mean, there's really no way that there could be any question if somebody tried to review the situation where they could try to throw out, well, that person was armed. Like, I mean, it's a perfect test case to see whether or not unarmed citizens will passively sit in their seat and allow you to beat the piss out of a person next to them to take away whatever they purchased. And the thing is, like, I don't know that, like, I don't know that everybody really recognized it for what it was. I mean, it was basically a test case to say how conditioned are the people, how conditioned are the citizens, how conditioned are private citizens that they would allow in a controlled situation on a very small plane where they have basically 10 to 1 or more than that in terms of people power physically, and they could stop this from happening, that they will just sit there and take it while we beat the shit out of someone right next to them. Unarmed citizens, let's see what happens. And what happened? Nobody moved. I mean, I think that was an awesome display of where like how conditioned the society has become. To me it was very telling and very disturbing, because I understand what you're talking about when you're saying, like, if you actually resisted an officer on the street and you could potentially be armed and they could claim whatever they want or plant something on you. But this is like after they've been screened, everyone has gone through, like, extensive screening. They have nothing to defend themselves with, like, unless you hit them with a laptop, and even then they don't want they don't want those on the plane now.
No, because they could have bombs inside of them.
So, like, let's put them in the cargo hold, so we have giant bombs flying around. Oh my god! As soon as I saw that, I was like, well, that's the next terror attack. They're just gonna have, there's some staged explosion that occurs in the cargo hold. And I'll say that it was it was terror attack. But really, I mean, the last time I flew, they wouldn't even let you have batteries, like individual batteries, unless you had to put tape over the top and the bottom so that they couldn't possibly spark. And you can't keep them in the cargo hold. Like, there's a whole list of stuff you're not supposed to put in the cargo hold. But I don't know. None of it makes sense logically. If you actually look into what rules and regulations are being passed, it's all just to maximize profit, and then to get people used to, like, to condition them in another way, and that's perfectly. It's succeeded perfectly, because nobody stood up, nobody did anything. I don't think I want those people involved in any kind of standoff with me if it comes to, like, civil disobedience. I mean, they could have literally just linked arms across the aisle and said, no, you can't take that person. They didn't have to beat anyone. It didn't need to be violent resistance on their part. It just needed to be, people making a wall of themselves in between the individual and the people who were actually threatening.
Yeah.
That would have been really easy. I don't know. It's very disappointing. Hoover Hammer. I wonder what the second one is called. I'm actually I've been trying this whole time. I've been trying to look up any information I can find on that second blimp that flies around that targets the actual data collection, and I don't see anything about it. I think that was probably the last article that came out, because they don't want you to know that they operate in tandem.
The NSA blimp.
Yeah, because it specifically says they operate together, and now they only talk about the Hoover Hammer, which is the bigger one that just sucks up all the data. So I'm thinking that the second one might even be smaller and less noticeable, but I'll have to dig into that a little bit, just out of curiosity. Hoover Hammer. Did you get the stream fixed?
Well, yeah, I switched to a cellular connection. I can only stay on it for so long. But it seems to be a problem with my internet service provider.
Ah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't have any problem accessing the page or the like any of that.
Yeah.
I didn't
So
have to restart anything.
it just seems to be a problem with my internet service provider, so I just switched to a cellular connection, and I'm just like, okay, so we're running good now, everything's running, but I wonder. I don't pay the bill whether they're throttling. I went over my data limit. I don't know.
Oh, you're you're being throttled on the before the internet's actually being throttled. You're using your data, and you're throttling yourself
Well, there's
basically.
certain internet service providers that actually do that kind of stuff. The first one I ever heard about was when my friend was in Hawaii. Um, she has a kid, and she told me that her internet service provider had changed something, and they didn't tell anybody. And they told me the data center was overran by these angry customers. And they started to tell people once they went over their data limit, they would intermittently start throttling people's data. And so I don't know how she's connected.
Well, I don't know if it happened to you guys or not, but I know that one of the things that they've done is they've split out the like the 5G 5G connection from your ISP and made that accessible, but it cuts out a lot of the time. Like I mean they did it for free and they provided a different tier.
Is anybody connected at that level?
5G? Yeah.
Oh,
I have
hold
that
on,
for
hold
I have
on.
that.
What is going on here? Oh God, I thought
I can't get this
I was
I
looking at
can't
the
get this
weird. I was
page
looking
to
at the
load.
weird screen. I'm like, oh shit, I got hacked again.
Paranoid, man.
Yeah. I threw the link
Kids
out there,
do.
but this is an actual military page that will not load for me, but it's supposed to have more information on the JLens program and actually have some pictures, but I don't know if you guys can manage to get it
This one?
to pull up. Yeah, it won't resolve the host for me whatsoever.
It's a .mil
Maybe I
page.
have too many things running.
Nope, won't resolve for
Yeah.
me either.
Oh, okay.
Hold
Well,
on,
it
hold
may have
on,
just.
hold on. Let me. It's trying to reach for Google first. Let me copy it and then paste the link. Hold on. Yeah, you're not going through Google first. Okay, so we're going to go directly to the host.
Why would it go
Not
through Google first? That's odd.
well, because I was using
Yeah, because this
Hangouts
is
first.
msl.army.mil pages cmds jlens html. It just won't come up on for me at all.
Oh, that's weird because
But
it's catched in Google as well. It says PEO missiles and space JLens Office.
yeah, I always get really well, I almost feel like that confirms just because I can't access something.
Oh, it
I'm
says
like, well,
error.
you know
Yeah, it
what?
says
That probably
error connection
confirms.
refused.
Yeah, it's not just timed out; it's refused, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know when this page went up. I haven't gone through the whois yet, but basically what I was trying to figure out was where is this documented other than one little report in the Intercept that there are multiple blimps floating around across the country. And I didn't, and this is what I found when I was researching it. It was a military page, but now it won't let me
Well,
go through
you
to
can
it.
actually reach some .mil pages, but a lot of them you can't.
I'll just get somebody I know to actually access the information. I mean, like I have family and friends who can probably get to it if I wanted to, but I just
You
like
mean
trying to
somebody
do a
on
quick.
base? Somebody on base?
Yeah. I mean, like seriously, if I want to know about it, I can just ask somebody on the base and say like, "Yo, dude, what's going on?" But I was just thinking like, you know, in general accessibility, no wonder this is something that most people don't know about, because even if you search for it and you try to pull up the information that's available, it's not available. And I'm sure that it's something where when you have to publicize these types of things, just by making the website inaccessible, you're not able, as an individual citizen. I don't know that you can prove that they're doing it on purpose. You would probably just blame it on, like, oh, my internet service provider is having problems, or it's just I don't have a good connection. Like, if my mom was trying to access this, if I was like, holy crap, there are 2 blimps, Mom, you should look at this, she'd be like, oh, I can't. That's too bad.
Must be that J-Lens thing, right?
Yeah. Oh, no. Now I got flagged again for something else, probably.
Unauthorized access of a military facility.
Yeah.
IT system.
Like, oh yeah, they're coming to your house tomorrow. Don't worry about it.
Well, that's something that a lot of people a lot more people know about, but not everyone does. Like the whole, when you try to access certain websites, depending on what links you click on, or even if you just go to the website, that automatically puts you into a category where you qualify for being tracked and being monitored, because you've tried to access information that's not. It makes you a potential suspect for who knows what. I guess it's free thinking. So, like, for instance, if you go to Boing Boing and you read anything, that automatically, if you click on certain sections of that, and maybe it's now the entire website, that escalates you to, or like raises you to a certain level of, like, oh no, this person touched this, so they must have a brain, therefore we must pay attention to what they're doing. And then you're on a list of like, people who are allowed to be monitored legally. I mean, like, this is legal. It's not something that that people have really paid attention to, but it's all part of the Patriotic Act that we put through, and PRISM and all of that.
I always get a laugh at how they name this. It's actually the Unpatriotic, Unconstitutional Act of 2001.
Yeah.
But whatever. It's the Patriot Act. Okay.
And the fact that these things keep getting extended too, like, I just don't understand how that's something that isn't argued. I get that people were really lulled into, or they had the whole shock and awe thing at the time. So even the people that protested against it, it wasn't the majority of the country that was saying, no, fuck this, we don't want to be spied on, and we're not going to give away our freedoms just so you can feel better. But the fact is that they keep getting extended. And it keeps coming up for votes, and it keeps getting extended. So the more recent one was to do with the fact that if you are charged as a terrorist, and because of the classification, so I mean, like, if you're an economic terrorist, in other words, you blocked a road in a protest, you stood in the middle of a road, just like in Selma, you can then get put into the category of where, like, now your lawyer. Your lawyer privileges in terms of having the private conversations, like, that's non-existent. All of your conversations with your lawyer are then monitored by the government. You do not have the capability to talk to your lawyer without having like, all of that recorded and monitored. So that's another way of putting people in a completely different category, not just for rendition and putting them into the expanded, refurbished Gitmo detention center, but you're going to have people who are just basically they're going to look at, like, what exactly you're talking to your lawyer about and what you did and didn't do. So now you have to worry about not confiding in your lawyer and providing yourself with a proper defense. That's just a whole nother level of crazy that we've introduced into the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, no more.
I assume that all your stuff's being monitored, but I mean, the fact that you can't even talk to your lawyer without being monitored, if you get charged with that, like, just imagine all the people who were, even the kids that were flying the drones around, to record information, how they were being at Standing Rock, how people were trying to say that they were inciting riots by providing data to others. Like, how soon is that going to start applying to anything, any type of communication, not just not just a video message that's going out to people, or just reporting on information? Like, you could be theoretically, you could be charged with inciting a riot if you just put something out in print.
Yeah, if you support the cause, if you're a leader, I mean, that thing is worded. If you even act, in any kind of defiant way, basically, you're up for charges now. I think there's a state or two that have actually passed that into law.
Mm-hmm. There was an attempt to. I don't know if it actually succeeded in going through in more than Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma was pretty crazy. It said something about how they actually were looking to pass the part about that, where if you had even been involved in the planning stage of any type of protest and then something went down in terms of it turning into a riot, you could be held financially responsible. I don't think it had really gone into the details of trying to get that worded as terrorism quite yet, but that's probably like the next thing that'll come out of it. They'll try to say that that's economic terrorism, and then therefore anybody who's linked to it by extension can be charged with that. And then that's also another way to get the private military contractors to be able to talk about it in a sense of like, well, this is terrorism, this is jihad, this is whatever the hell it is that they were trying to say. It's absurd, but that's where we are. So it's not that shocking that those kinds of laws are being pushed. I mean, they've been written. Like all of these ideas have been written and put into storage to be pulled out until like at this point when it was appropriate, when it was something that could actually get passed. And it's the same thing that happened with the Patriot Act. That was in place. That was already drafted before any of 9/11 happened. It wasn't something that they just suddenly came up with after the fact. It existed before.
Oh, really? I wasn't aware of that.
They didn't have a way of passing it. Like, nobody in their right mind at the time would have said, sure, that sounds like a great idea. Let's just spy on everybody. No, of course not. But they were looking to have that pass years before. They needed a moment in time when that would be accepted. And I think if people understand that, then it's a lot less of a jump to say, well, what exactly did happen, that like what did go down during those quote unquote attacks of 9/11. So usually when I talk to people about it, I start with like, here's the information and all of the stuff that proves that the Patriot Act was actually drafted before.
I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah. That's why I started looking into it at first, because I was just like, wait a minute, how did this come out so quickly? Like, it's just too coincidental. And then if you go back and you look into all of the all the statements that were made, it was actually talked about before
1995.
it was publicized. Yes.
Holy shit!
I was looking for the date and I couldn't remember, but yeah, 95 was when it was actually put into more, like, at least it was made known that this was actually out there, but they didn't know how to implement it. So there you go. You have your moment in time when everybody got freaked out enough to say, okay.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. But I don't know if you've also put together the fact that every time there's an extension of a specific section of the Patriot Act that needs to be voted on, there's always a corresponding event that happens that completely distracts from that extension. So whenever people who have been actively protesting this since the beginning actually try to put together opposition, not just within the political system, there's always some other event that happens that draws all the public attention away from that. So it's much easier for it to get extended. But again, I mean, it doesn't take much to take some of this down, because even, what was it? It was one person who sued and actually won when the habeas corpus was suspended by the Obama administration. It was Chris Hedges that did that, and he was just one Presbyterian minister from upstate New York. He sued the administration and said, this is unconstitutional, and he won. And it was actually overturned later on an appeal, and the Supreme Court refused to hear it again. They won't review the appeal. Or after the appeal that overturned it, they're not going to go back and re-examine it because, of course, that's not in the best interest of the government at this point. But it was one individual who brought a suit against the entire government with regard to habeas corpus and actually had that removed. So the people can do that. It's just, I don't know that they're all paying attention to it, because a lot of people I talk to are just like, oh, I had no idea that was something that needed to be extended and voted on, or that you could actually sue people if they do vote for that to be extended. It's shocking, and then at the same time it's not, because it's like you do need to explain to people and educate them on what kind of power they have. It's like you're not incapable of making changes. It's just you're not aware of that kind of power that you have.
You have to have a lot of time and money. Really the money to even think about going out to hire a lawyer to do all this. It's plus the time to ramrod it and make sure they're doing their job and all that. It takes a unique individual. There's not many around.
It is tough. I admit. I'm not saying you can just decide all of a sudden if you have no connections and no money that you're going to suddenly take on the entire government without any kind of support. But I think one of the ways that we can change that is by simply providing the information, and also trying to put together a system for the people to actually kind of, since you have to crowdsource everything anymore anyway, why not put together crowdsource legal funds to start protecting citizens against the government, and start saying, instead of making it an impossibility for one person without money to do, why don't you have people who are actually coming together and saying, here's a problem, this is going to come up, or this is happening right now, we need to take some legal action, so let's put together a group that's going to work to fundraise for that, as opposed to fundraising for some absurd NGO or organization that's not going to really benefit you. People contribute money to charities all the time, and they're not really doing anything with the money directly that impacts you. A lot of people just give away money at a certain level of society where they feel like that's sufficient for changing or making an impact. But really, if they had better options, then maybe they would actually invest in that and start putting money into that. You could actually make a change in the country. It doesn't even mean that the person in that position who maybe has thousands of dollars to contribute would need to be told that they have that kind of power. They would just need a place they would need to be given an opportunity to put their money into that. I don't think people are going to take the time to create those organizations themselves, though. So that's one of the things I'm trying to work on, is getting people together in terms of saying we don't need to have we don't need to wait for the ACLU to get on this, because if you submit something to them, that could, unless it's at that level where you're actually being listed as an enemy or an enemy of the state, it's not necessarily going to get you attention right away. Unless it's that high level, that high profile, you're not going to get the ACLU to contact you for 2 years. I think I called them about something last summer, and it wasn't the worst thing in the world. And I probably, if I had more money, I could have sued the company on my own. But I called the ACLU and I was like, hey, this is going on. This is definitely a civil liberties issue, and you should look into it. Well, I got a call 2 months ago. And they're like, hey, we're returning your call from January 1st of 2016 regarding the issue against blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wow, thanks for getting back to me. You're just, almost a year too late. I mean, they're not capable of handling everything. So if we start working on our own organizations to do that, to fund that kind of thing, we can be more effective as citizens.
You're going to be swamped. Well, that's the ACLU's problem. I've heard that about them as well. That they get so many complaints that they literally can't handle it. And like you're saying, if it doesn't rise to a certain level, it just rolls off the back. You're not going to even get a phone call. It's not that it wasn't important, but it's probably happening 100 other places as well.
Yeah. And sharing that kind of information, because if you feel like, oh, well, this is only happening to me, I don't know that even when, let's say 100 people have the same problem across the country and they've all called the ACLU about it, it doesn't mean that that's going to get the same attention as 100 people calling about something else. But if you knew that, that's enough to sometimes drive a class action lawsuit against a company or against the government or whatever institution it is that you have, an issue with that's violating your liberty and your rights. So if you are aware of those other people having the same issues, again, that's just like with reporting all of the chromium-6 in your water. If you have everyone aware of other people who are going through the same thing, that are experiencing the same issues, then you could actually come together as a group and say, this is how we can attack this. This is what we can do to fund it as a community. Because that's what creates community, like having those common causes and having those common issues that you have to work through. So it's just a question of getting the information out and sharing it with each other. And again, reporting it and not feeling like, well, there's nothing I can do about that. So why bother talking about it? I think that's frequently what happens. Like a lot of people just say, well, I'm not going to bitch and moan about it because this has been going on for years and nothing's going to change. But if you start talking about it and you start talking to people around you, you find out, wait a minute, this isn't something that is specific to me or to my neighborhood. Maybe it's something that's actually affecting the whole country, and we just don't talk to each other about it. Because that's what I'm seeing now. Like whenever I talk about something with a small group, if I go into another group of people and I mention it, they're like, oh, hey, you know what? That's happening to me too. And then they find out they have more in common with each other than they ever thought before. So it does end a lot of arguments too, because you find out that you actually have more things that are going on that bring you together than what drive you apart.
Yeah, agreed. Stream hanging in there, Tyler?
Yeah, we're down to 2 viewers.
Oh.
Yay!
we went from like a lot to what the fuck because of this upload.
Yeah, every time this glitch hit, we lost like 10 of them. Yeah.
Let me try to switch back to Wi-Fi. Just give me 1 second. I might disappear for a second. All right.
Okay.
I'll disappear. 1, 2, 3, 4.
But it has to do with the most recent extension of the one section of the Patriot Act, and it was just up for vote. Again, like everything's all about the Russia issue and hacking versus leaks versus and then there was even the Comey testimony was such bullshit the other day, because I mean, like anybody who's ever watched or even like participated in the legal system, like you don't open such you don't answer such open-ended questions. Like even when he was being asked about like the participation of Russia in the elections there, and the whole idea of like, did they hack this, did they hack that, and everything, like people are arguing about whether or not that means that they actually got into the voting system and manipulated all of the votes, and nobody really understands, but they're arguing about that, and they're not paying attention to any of the stuff that's going on right now in the country in terms of what's being passed as legislation. I mean, like this is all a big distraction from everything else that's going on in terms of the actual meaningful stuff that's happening to affect the whole country. as far as the laws that are being passed, just like the one that you mentioned in Oklahoma. That's already forgotten. People aren't even talking about like how that was pushed through anymore. They're not trying to get rid of the ruling at all. Again, like the more laws that get passed that or put up for votes that say, oh well, we're going to be able to put you in jail for this now. I don't think people are. They don't have the attention span either. That's the other thing. Oklahoma. They don't have the attention span to pay attention for that long, to actually like come back around to the problems that exist. And I don't know. I feel like there needs to be like a complete removal or unplugging from the system in terms of like the social media platforms, and like just have everybody go on a massive like media not even just like somebody had put out the idea of a mainstream media detox, but even just the idea of like getting away from all of media just for like a couple days and turning everything off, and then coming back with like somewhat of a clear mind to actually focus on what's important, as opposed to just ingesting all of this shit that's coming out all the time.
A media fast.
Yeah. That's perfect. That's what I was trying to say. Someone had said like a detox, but even that wasn't like.
Well, yeah, it does. It's or what do you call it? A rehab. You have to go to media rehab. You're just done with it all, man. You've overloaded. You've gone toxic. You know, it's you got to medically bring you back.
Yeah, like even how to think critically and pick apart all of the stuff that's coming out, because even when you say mainstream media, that's one thing, but even when you have a list of trusted sources, like even just like with the Intercept to a certain degree, there are some journalists that write stuff that's true, and then there are other journalists that just don't know what they're doing, or they are purposely putting out misinformation. So you have to look at multiple sources, and just the idea of teaching people that you need to not rely on one outlet for your news. Like you can't just watch Fox News. You know, obviously that's what Trump does. Like he watches one source, and it looks like, because he spouts whatever comes on the next, like a couple hours later. But regardless of what your source is, no matter how trusted it may have been in the past, you still need to compare it to what else is out there, and look at like 10 different things and see how the story changes. It's kind of like that, like don't believe anything that you hear and only half of what you see.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it sounds so lame, but it's true. You have to really look at everything with suspicion, like a healthy dose of suspicion, because you can't just accept it as gospel and say like, oh yeah. Like even when you look at NPR and different outlets that were supposed to be respected for their reporting, they have some pretty crappy stuff that comes out. I mean, I know that a lot of people in this area will listen to that and be like, well, it was on PBS, or it was on NPR, so it must be true because they've been around for so long, and they don't, what are the chances that they've started to employ people who don't necessarily even know how to report correctly anymore, because it's a different kind of training that you get when you go through journalism in school now. You're supposed to cater to what's popular and what's exciting and what will bring in the most revenue for the company, not necessarily the investigative journalism that's being done by many people. But I mean, that used to be how you would be trained as a journalist, is to provide concise, researched information and go through different sources to get different viewpoints. And now it's just like, no, whatever draws the most money and the most likes, the most absurd stories that are out there. That's why I'm actually impressed with the little patch reports that come out sometimes, like the local news. And I think the patch is like everywhere. I don't know who first put it together, but I mean, just the fact that they would carry something on their website about all of the pollution that's in the water. I mean, at least they are trying to put that information out. I think it's for every state in the country. There's like, let's see. Yeah. There's one for anywhere you go here. Yeah, everything local. Now, granted, I don't know who any of these journalists are, but at least you can get information that compares to whatever the larger outlets are saying. And the people who are actually contributing to these local reports seem to at least be on the ground, and they're talking to individuals as opposed to just taking information that's being called into a large news agency in the area. Here's one. Yeah, here, let me pull that up and give that to you guys. Whoops.
Yeah, well, I see this even with the local news. There's a severe lack of any kind of investigative reporting for anything. They just defer anything. They don't look into government at all, any contracting, any of the old ways they used to, try to be the fourth branch or fifth branch, whatever they're referred to. I think it's fourth branch. The fourth branch. They don't do it. And now for the most part, they've turned into mainstream. Well, the mainstream has turned into the state-run media. They just spew talking points, whatever the CIA liaison office sends them for the day, the package, media package for the day, and plug it in, man. You just read off the teleprompter, no problem.
Yeah, I think that the little outlets are sometimes more illuminating than the larger ones, because they do have people that haven't been bought yet because they haven't risen to prominence. As soon as you get to a certain level of exposure, that's probably when most journalists get picked off and basically offered different positions where they think they have a lot of leeway and they have more funding, but really it's all targeted. You can report on certain things. You're not going to get a lot of your stories out if you don't do exactly what the organization wants you to, and then that's really why you have to become independent of all of that and almost start your own news organizations. Otherwise, you are really just being stuck with whatever people dictate.
It's too bad. I talked to a New York Times reporter one time, and I kind of relate to what I thought. How they were like essentially a left-leaning newspaper and all. But at the same time, I was telling it's a shame because you guys have like the most number of awards for your investigative reporting, over the years, and awards for such things, and yet so you have that good side, but then you have to throw in all this other left-leaning garbage that just destroys everything you've built, by doing the other stuff. It just, I don't know if I got it across to it properly, but that's kind of what I see from the media. It's just they do some good things. There's good reporting in there, but it's just so much garbage thrown into the side of it. It becomes useless.
Well, they are all owned. The media outlets are all owned by larger interests. So of course they do dictate to a certain degree what is accepted and what isn't, and then of course they're going to have to throw out a lot of shit, really, a lot of really crappy shit, because that's, I think it's not even just that that they're putting out fake stories. I think a lot of the bullshit is out there because it's become entertainment. It's not really what news was supposed to be. It's entertainment. And the more you can make it about
Well, yeah, that
almost like an extension of like what, like the like an extension of Survivor or whatever it is that
TMZ
you're
and
interested in. Yeah, I mean, like it's not going to make you think critically. It's going to make you stop questioning. If you just keep seeing all of the same puff pieces that they put out, basically. I mean, that's what they used to call them, right? Like it was like a puff piece, and you would get one or two of them just to kind of lighten up the tension because everything was so terrible all the time. Now it's like you have to search for the terrible articles in terms of the ones that actually have an impact or actually mean something, and have been researched and have more than one source too. I've noticed that, like a lot of journalists, it used to be you would list your sources. Now they just list the journalists, like as if like that's supposed to explain like where all of the information came from. So I don't even know that people demand that kind of information anymore, because it used to be as soon as you would question what somebody wrote, you would be like, well, who is your source? Where did you get this information? Where did you get that information? And usually if it wasn't like national security, of course, or if it wasn't something that would hurt the person in terms of making them a target, you would at least verify who it was in some capacity, like what organization you got it from or what business you got it from. But now it's just a bunch of businesses that are saying, we want our product sold, or we want our business to look good in the public eye, so we want you to do a piece on us and make it sound like we have the next greatest thing, or working for us would be really awesome because this came out about us. I mean, it's all advertising for companies, basically, whether or not it's an actual placed, like a paid placed ad. It's really, a lot of the articles are just advertising companies and how you should go work for them, or you should trust them, or you should think that they're a company you should basically worship, in other words.
yeah, as they narrow down the companies that run all this, you see the same things over and over. It's just the lack of diversity of subjects, people looking at things. It's all channeled certain ways. It's not depressing. It's disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, no journalism, even at its best, is ever unbiased. I mean, everybody has their own personal biases, but there is something to be said for like you said, the actual investigative journalism that is applied, and that's not really even something to say that investigative journalism only needs to be used when it comes down to something that is very, very important, where you're talking about a murder or misallocation of funds by a bank, or or corruption. I mean, like that's the kind of approach that I think that people don't have to every single or it's not obvious that that's something that you would have to every single story that you're supposed to work on as a reporter. And that's where people don't draw that line between this is reporting and this is actually news that's supposed to be ingested as such, but this, on the other hand, is just pure entertainment and filler. Basically, it's just another form of advertising, and that's not never really made clear to people, because it doesn't seem like well, not only is it not in the best interest of the outlet, whatever they're publishing, but I don't think that they've really grasped the idea that propaganda is something that's okay. I mean, like the government has said it's okay to use it. Like, you don't have to have a real story. You can make up a story and put it out there. And it doesn't mean the CIA is making up propaganda all the time, because they have the legal right to do it now, doesn't mean that they're the only ones who are going to take advantage of it. So even the newspapers, to advertise themselves, will put out, or the news outlets can make up propaganda just to make themselves look better. It's on every level.
Yeah.
Because I know that when you talk to people about propaganda, they think it only comes from institutions like that, like a government, or like a branch of the government. Because I suppose maybe it's the term propaganda, but really it's it's anything. You can use lies legally to bolster interest in products through advertising, and now you can do it. You can do it through what are vaguely considered to be reporting outlets. So it's just a more slick form of advertising, basically.
You see the same thing going on. Well, just like Facebook narrowing down who's on, what they get to say. I mean, I guess, well, it happened in the newspaper industry before.
Makes things easier for people to get the information that they want, and as a marketing tool, it's fantastic because you can target people based on what they really like, and all of that has been basically the way you look at the world. Like you're supposed to see it as a better way of living. In other words, like you giving them information, and then you're being given what you need and what interests you back is the best way of living. When in fact, you should have the ability to choose everything that you see, and why should it not all be available to you instead of running through a filter on a screen? And it's not going to it's not going to be in someone's best interest if they're trying to make a profit, of course. But I mean, like people think that is perfectly fine to have. It's perfectly fine to accept it and to ingest all of their information that way, as opposed to going around the system and saying, well, no, I want more than this. I want something better. Because I think that also applies with the whole the idea of, like, universal health care. Like that is something we want, something better. We want to be treated as we deserve, but yet people will still get into the argument of which system is better in terms of the two shit options that have nothing to do with universal health care. I mean, like, why are you even arguing over the two systems? Because they're not what you want anyway.
Yeah, and then there's all these other groups that got literally thousands of groups that got waivers, companies and so forth. So they're not even part of the two crappy options. They're over there doing whatever they want to do because they're special. Waivers from the whole thing. I mean, it's like, give me a break.
That should tell you right there that,
yeah,
if you had any doubt that either one of these systems is shit, why is it that they would want a waiver to be outside of all of that?
Yeah, why is it that unions and all these companies don't like it? Well, it's because it's shitty. That's for you, the slaves. They don't want any part of that. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, like, sorry, but that's
exactly true. It's true. It's true. But I mean, like, just coming to that point of realization where you say, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. But instead, people are attacking it from the standpoint of, well, maybe oh, well, that's not fair. That's not fair that they have that ability. That's not fair that they can have the better health insurance. We should have it too. Yes, but then it stops right there, because the next step is, well, remove it from them, take it away. You're giving them permission to have it, and then you're feeding into a system that continues this whole insanity. You're saying, like, it's okay by participating according to their rules, as opposed to taking back your own autonomy and saying that you're allowed to have these things because you're an individual that deserves those things, and you don't need to be part of a system that isn't going to provide that to you.
Yeah, it's not. Well, for me, what makes it unconstitutional, among other things, that there's not an equal application of the law to everybody. That's one of the main things. Like, this is, it's nobody above the law, sort of thing. Everybody is equal under the law, and that's a perfect example right there of how you're not. We can pass this law, and yet we're going to exempt all these other people from it. Well, I mean, what kind of system is that? That's I don't know. It's not America. It's not constitutional. It's not even. Yeah, no. It's for the corporations. It's an oligarchy or plutocracy. It's designed for the rich. It's not designed for the people.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
and then we have all these exceptions. Why is that? So I just don't see how they get there. There's so many ways you can look at it as being unlawful. How do they get away with it? That whole Roberts thing. Oh, well, we're going to stick it under the Commerce Clause. I mean, that was another joke. It's like, whatever. You guys got this thing so scrambled up. It's no wonder nobody gives a shit about this government.
And it's not that complicated when it comes to how to fix it. I mean, and how to change things. It's just, again, it's all disinformation and people not understanding that they do actually have that kind of power to make it, because it is your country, your constitution, and they are beholden to you. So why are you asking them and not telling them? That's what I don't. I mean, it just seems to me like everybody's begging. They're on their knees begging. Please, please give us what we want. When you should be demanding it, and you should be saying, no, this is not something I will ask again. You are being told this is what you must do, and you will do it now, or else you won't get my money, you won't get my cooperation, and you won't have a citizenry that feeds into your rules and your systems that are taking advantage of everybody who is not at that level, who can't afford to keep paying to try again and try again. I mean, like that's basically the difference between the classes, when in that you're saying if you're from the class that has all of the money, who can afford to fail, you get multiple chances. You can do this again and again and again because you're given either the money to pay to do it again, a do-over. Basically, you can reset your game, so to speak. Like you can just try again, or pay so you don't fail. But when you're somebody who doesn't have that kind of privilege and class and everything else available to them, you pretty much get one chance, and you're done. And then people wonder why they're everything's so unbalanced and unfair in that you can't get ahead, you can't succeed in certain ways. It's just because you fail once and then you're pretty much wiped out financially, or you don't get another chance to come back into the system, or like you were saying with originally, like if you get arrested, you're going to get charges out the ass pinned on you if you can't afford the right kind of lawyer to avoid that, and then therefore it affects you for the rest of your life. Whereas, of course, if you can afford it, you don't even have more than like a little reprimand on file, if that, get it expunged. Like all of that is just buying your way out of a system, basically. So if you can't afford to buy your way out of a system, stop participating in it. I mean, that's the only true power that those institutions have over you, is like they keep you participating in their game. You're playing by their rules. You're always going to be at a disadvantage as long as you play by their rules.
Yeah, once you get ensnared by the system of it, they don't let you go. You don't have a choice then. Well, you can always run.
Well, I mean, like even the idea of like, well, you have to keep going to this, you have to keep doing this job here at this specific place and paying into the system, and or else you're going to lose your home, and you're going to lose this, and you're going to lose that. Yeah, it's all a system meant to keep you in this constant servitude state where you're feeling like there is no escape, and even if there was, I mean, we have our controlled escape too, along with controlled descent. We have what is called vacations. We have controlled escape.
Or mental vacation.
When people start to go insane from pleasure.
I'm not joking. When you think about it, they got the CIA running cocaine on the streets, and God knows how the heroin's getting here. They get these mental vacations. They keep us subservient.
Yeah, and those people who they don't work for a company that gives you paid vacation. Well, guess what? Guess what we have for you? Just like you said, all of the drugs that can take your mind away from what's hurting, like all the pain I mean, like the whole thing that pisses me off about this absurdity with drug addicts and people who are looked down on because they're using drugs on a regular basis. They're not doing it because there's some kind of like moral deficiency in that person. They're doing it probably because they care too much.
Well, there's
Because
actually,
they
well,
hurt.
yeah, well, I used to be a drug and alcohol counselor. There's several reasons why people start using drugs, but one of the not obvious ones is to cope with the surroundings around them. And if your life is fucking shit, right, and you're living on the streets,
Yeah.
what you gonna turn to? You know, you can't make a buck.
Yeah, if you have no solace
you
in
got 10
a
felonies.
structure, you know, like
Yeah.
in a healthy, you know, like a healthy support system. If you don't have that, and how can any of our society be called a healthy support system? Because it's not. If you don't have that, what are you going to do? Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Well,
that people are doing that, and
addiction's going to hit people regardless, but that's one of the ones that's not really obvious is why the homeless population and the correlation between drugs and how they got there is not always obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if you're not physically addicted, there's the emotional, mental part of it, and that I mean, like ultimately, I do believe, like no matter how you wind up, no matter how you wind up involved in different substances, usually, if you're going to seriously get into it, there's something lacking in life in general. Like there's something that's not there. There's something that society has failed you, not that you have failed as an individual.
Oh yeah. For a lot of
You know,
people,
your surroundings have failed you.
it's a coping mechanism, a chemical mask.
Yeah, because even the people who do it because they feel overwhelmed by something, that I mean that's one thing, but then there's the whole aspect of like you turn to it because you were never taught how to cope with your surroundings in a healthy way either, because maybe like your whole family had problems with coping issues because I mean they've been through a lot of trauma. There's all kinds of reasons for it, but basically it comes down to you know, like none of these people are choosing to kill themselves and absorb an obscene amount of drugs because it just feels good initially. I mean, it's much deeper than that, and there are a lot of things that affect everyone, and a lot of people tend to just kind of write it off as well. This is just something that a bunch of people who have no lives get involved in. Like it's just poor people or people who have no you know, just like with homeless. Like like obviously if I was homeless, I wouldn't be very happy. So how am I going to cope with that if I can't get a job and I can't, you know, find a place to live and no one's taking care of my family except me, and I don't know how to do that because I can't get a job and I can't, you know, like I mean it's just so much pressure on you. How are you ever going to feel like a complete human being if you have to deal with that kind of stuff? So it's sad that we also villainize or demonize and put people down who are homeless. It's not because they chose that.
No, generally not. There's a lot
I mean,
of no. Well, you know what?
I mean,
that's
I'm
not
sure
true.
you can
That's
find
not
someone
true.
who say,
I have run into a few people in my addiction and recovery. I have run into a few where they chose that, but they were not. How should I say? I don't think they were all there. That one guy
was that possibly a better situation?
Well, he was a crackhead, and he said that ditching his house, his home, and his kids was a freeing experience, and he was all over the U.S. And I was just like, this guy's, I don't know, he just has a different mindset than I would like think. He actually enjoyed being homeless, and I was like, okay,
Yeah, but that I can understand that he said that, though, because to me that makes perfect sense in some ways. That when you think about how people react to if you're actually, you know, kind of mentally healthy, like what we have in this society is not normal. It is not. You can't act like I mean, like under the systems that we have. How can you really feel like a free individual if you feel like you're a slave to the system? Like if all of what you do every day is to just contribute to keeping yourself in the same place and not moving anywhere. Like you're just basically treading water and you feel like you're drowning in a lot of ways. So I've met people who have left their entire, like they've just walked away from everything because they couldn't deal with the sense of like helplessness and loss and feeling trapped at the same time. Like they could never, no matter how hard they worked, no matter how hard they tried to, like be a provider or be a role model or like whatever, it didn't change anything, and it just left them feeling like pretty empty and useless, and also having to take care of people outside of yourself. Sometimes it's just, you're not in that kind of position. So I get where someone like that is coming from, but I'm just thinking from the standpoint of having to take care of, like if you walked up to like 6 different homeless people, they're generally not going to tell you like, I did this because I feel free and I can roam the countryside and I escaped the system.
Usually,
like I left everything behind.
It's usually what starts it is usually not an addiction, not all the time, but I do get I lost my job, and I have a medical condition, and I can't physically do the things that I used to do, and then things got worse. And then they somehow or another developed a substance abuse disorder, or what we like to call, aka drug addiction along the way. So it's not always obvious as it seems, though.
No, it's never like that. That's why I find it very, very myopic to say like, oh well, that person's homeless and they should just pull themselves up by the bootstraps, so
it's
to speak.
It's actually not as easy. That was my number one problem dealing with low bottom indigent cases, is that yes, we got them off of drugs, but where they go after here to get their lives back together is it's the best solution I had at one point was to tell them to go on job searches and do that. But here's the thing, is that once they leave the facility, they're still left homeless. They're really, you know what I mean? So I don't know.
Well, I think everybody that I've talked to who was homeless at one point in time or another, they've all explained that it was, I mean, even if they were coming from white collar jobs, when they lost their job, like when they got laid off or when they got when they like got fired for whatever reason, they were unable to get another job after that, just because of the economy for some of the people. And then the other thing that they cited was right, like after you lose housing after a certain point, you can't even rent an apartment, like if you've been homeless for a certain amount of time, because they look into your previous residence. So if it's almost like when you have a lapse of insurance. If you have a certain period of time when you haven't been in housing, you can't find another place to live.
Well, it's like your options have become even lower,
Yeah, like you have this ever smaller circle of opportunities that are available to you. And then of course, if you don't have transportation, how can you get a job and all of that? So really all of it is linked. And if you lose one, you kind of boot yourself out of the system, and then you have to function outside of that. So that's where like support systems would come into place if people were willing to come together and organize to do other things, as opposed to trying to work through the system. Because even then, when you apply for something like let's say you get laid off or you lose a job for whatever reason, if you apply for unemployment, you still have to wait for hearings sometimes, and I mean that can be months on end. So what do you do in the meantime?
I was fighting with an employer who battled my unemployment. With knowing full well that I was homeless. Right, I was homeless after I lost everything. They knew it. So
Have you got any comments or questions, Charlie? We've got about 10 minutes.
No, we've had so many connection issues. I think we only have 3 viewers right now. Like I'm telling you, like when I'm saying that there's something major going on my end, on the back end, I think my internet service provider is either A, fucking up, or B, is throttling my upstream, which is kind of weird. I only had this issue once for like 20 minutes, but not now. So I don't pay for the service, but I can always call and ask them what the hell is going on. I'll probably get some weird answer that they can't answer, or some weird bullshit.
Say, now, Tyler, come on. It's really not that bad. You've got great service. Everything's fine. You know, quit calling us up like this and giving us these reports, because you know it's not true.
Oh.
Or, hey, we got a better package for you, Tyler, but it's going to cost you another $50 a month. How about that?
Oh, and maybe it's not my internet service provider. Hold on.
Oh, man.
Having issues with
copyright issue, did you?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's what happened last time, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't get hit with anything. It was one thing after another, and at one point I was getting that, the sad face when you can't load a page or it's been DDoSed or whatever, and I was getting that on Facebook, so I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I'm asking around, and other people aren't having the same issue, so. But yeah, it will not upload for the light of day.
That's odd. No, I just can't access the page, and I don't have any other information that came in from the from this other person that I had asked about more details on Flint, so I don't have anything else here.
Yeah, I'll have this issue fixed by next Tuesday. But this is ridiculous.
Were you saying something about using the Discord server to do the voice portion of it?
That might help with some of the data stuff. What I'm experiencing right now is it's not problems with the download speed; it's a problem with the upload speed.
Right.
Which doesn't.
I'm just thinking. I know that I do get a certain amount of lag on the other platforms compared to Discord, and it's just because it just runs really really smoothly.
That might
on
be.
there,
Yeah,
because it doesn't store as much crap in the background.
Let me see. Test my upload speed. I have a network monitoring tool that's probably going to tell me the same thing. Oh. Test my net speed. Boom. Xfinity, Google servers. What does it say? Come on. Yeah, download speed's up at 20 megabit. Nice. And then upload speed. Major issues. Unless it's my roommate, I'm gonna kill him.
Wait, he hopped on and started playing PlayStation, and that killed your.
Yeah, come on, that sounds kind of weak, man. I mean,
You sound like you're very technically proficient there when you have you have somebody jump on and start playing like. Oh my god! No, that's too funny. That happened the other day. I forget what I was doing, but I turned on something dumb. Like it was just like I think I started streaming something off of Netflix at the same time that something was on YouTube, and I didn't realize it was running in the background. And I was like, "What the hell happened? Like I have all these problems with this," and then I just realized, oh, yeah, I just have too many things running at once. My ISP kind of sucks. Actually, I need to put a new router in. So I don't know if I should have done that sooner. Most likely, I should have.
Just buy 100 internet. It's kind of what I need.
So we're still going?
Yeah, we can end it though.
Yeah, I think we're getting close to 4 hours.
Let me see if there are any viewers. Any viewers? We had a lot at the beginning.
Yeah, no,
Are you
something
watching
went wrong.
No, I'm not watching. Any viewers? We had a lot of.
You were cruising along 30 to 50 there before the glitches happened.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut the stream. Boom. Dun dun dun.
Hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly.
I apologize.
It's okay. What's happening?
I order all those assembled to immediately disperse.